I am so excited for today's podcast guest. We have Keith Pinckney on the podcast. I recently ran into some of his content on Instagram and then his podcast. It's become my new favorite Bible podcast to listen to. We'll get more into that in the interview, but this is someone you're going to want to listen to. He's a perfect Bible guide, regardless of where you're coming from, whether you have known nothing about the Bible and you're trying to get involved, or if you have been reading the Bible for years and you just want to go deeper. You're going to find it all in his podcast and who he is as a person. So without further ado, let's dive into our conversation. Keith, thank you so much for joining us.
Hey, Matt, thank you so much for having me, man. It's a pleasure to be here. I appreciate it.
So I want to start with just a general question. Let's just say someone, maybe they happen to not be familiar with you. Can you tell us a little about yourself?
Yeah.
And then also specifically, did you get into doing biblical studies
Mhm.
and that kind of stuff? Can you introduce yourself?
Yeah. So, my name is Keith Pinckney. Like you said, I grew up in Atlanta, Georgia. I actually still live in Atlanta now. From the east side of the city. Man, I grew up here, playing sports. Didn't grow up as a Christian. I came to Christian faith in college, and I was playing Division I college basketball, and in that time was just a transformative time. And ever since my freshman year of college, when I became a believer, there was just this hunger and passion to know God and to know Jesus and to learn about the scriptures that's still there. And so I went to college, became a Christian. I did some campus ministry stuff, played sports the whole time, graduated college, and it was like, hey, man, I just have this passion to study the Bible and do ministry. And I just want people to know God and to love God. And so I moved back home to Atlanta. I go to this church. My pastor actually in college was like, hey, you should check out this church called Cornerstone Church. And so that's when I came back home, checked out Cornerstone, and just never left. I met on the first day one of my closest friends, one of my co-hosts for the podcast, Windows and Mirrors podcast, and my pastor, John
Hmm.
Amuchekwa. And so I met him, and then we got linked up and got involved with the church, started serving, became an intern, started seminary. And so started seminary as part of the internship with the church. And my my mind was like exploded. You know what I mean? Just learned so much, so fast, and I couldn't get enough of it. And so, long story short, after that, that's when I decided after before I graduated, I was like, man, I want to keep going and keep studying. And so I talked to my professors and kind of worked through all of that. And so now I'm going to pursue a PhD in Old Testament, Hebrew Bible Old Testament from University of St. Andrews in Deuteronomy. And so really, really looking forward to that. Me and my wife have about less than 2 months before we
Yeah.
leave Atlanta and our lives change forever.
Wow.
And so, yeah, I mean, I can go more into like the kind of technical biblical studies, like how I
Hmm.
got into specific Old
Yeah.
Testament kind of stuff if you
Hmm.
want. Or we can pivot.
Sure. No, that's great. I love the story
Yeah.
too. I think it's awesome people who can hear the background because you know it's amazing how we all come to faith in
Yeah.
Jesus and we all have different stories. And I think it's great people to find how we can all relate to that.
Yep.
Um, so one thing I'm also curious about for the sake of this podcast is why did you decide to focus in Old Testament specifically? Because that's just, I think for most people, we feel like, hey, Christian, Jesus is like really explicitly clear. The New Testament part, Old
Mm,
Testament's longer. I think it's more boring. Why would you
yeah.
go there? Like what? So what's your story in choosing
Man.
to such as Old Testament part?
Man, like you said, man, like I just love the Bible, right? So
Mm,
like even now I talk to friends who are like in the academy and working in other fields, and I'm like just as interested in the New Testament and theology and other stuff.
yeah.
So when I get to seminary, I take my courses. You have a class on, every book of the Bible. You have your language courses and all that kind of stuff. What I found was at the same time as I was doing seminary, I was doing ministry, serving at my church,
Mm,
uh, going out in the community. And what I found was in the community that I served in, African American context, there are many what I would call like Black identity groups. And so you have people who would identify as Nation of Islam, as Hebrew Israelites, which is a whole thing in itself, and just so many different groups. And a lot of the groups, and a professor said this, but a lot of the groups basically form their group based on an interpretation of an Old Testament passage.
mm, okay.
And so he pointed that out, and then I actually found it to be true. And they would use what I would say is bad interpretations of particular biblical passages to justify the kind of group they were forming, or they were, on the flip side of that, they were hurt by someone in the church or in Christianity by Old Testament passages. So I was like, oh no, like this needs to be thought through. And so there was that element, the kind of like ministerial, missional element that compelled me in my heart. And so there was that. And then at the same time, when I came to the academy and I was looking at Old Testament scholarship and biblical scholarship in general, there didn't seem to be a plethora of resources addressing the core cultural concerns of my community, right? So instead of like being mad that there aren't so many people doing it, I was like, I want to be one of those people that do it. You see what I'm saying? And so that kind of led me rabbit trail. And then just kind of like you said, the Old Testament is just weird for a lot of people, let's be honest.
Yeah.
And just wanting the average like Christian to know like, hey, this is scripture for you. This is important. There's so much like richness and depth here. So that, and then like at the same time, it's like, man, it'll be really hard. There are things in the New Testament you'll miss if you're not acquainted with the structure and the people and the text of the Old Testament. So there was that. And then I liked Hebrew more than Greek. So just
nice
kind of practical things like that, man. And yeah, man. So it kind of worked out in that way. But it started with that burden, you know what I mean, for real people. And it's funny because, and sorry if I'm talking long.
That's great.
It's funny because many times, in the academy, we can just operate in silos, right? Like our work can be disconnected from how this affects real people on the ground. And so even in kind of like coalescing with the podcast, it's I want to take the best insights I can here and package them in a way where it's palatable to the average believer. You know what I'm saying? African American or not, the average believer, where they can take this, learn from this, and grow and be nurtured and fed from this as well.
That is so good. I'm so glad you brought that up. I kind of wanted to dig even a little deeper into this because there's, what's the best way to put this? I think it's really easy to get siloed, especially I think for some people with the academic journey is intense. It's a long time. So for some people, it's like, all right, you go do your undergrad, then your master's and your PhD. And again, I'm not trying to like call people out as if like they're doing something necessarily bad, but it's before you know it, you're in the classroom in the library all the time. And I'd be curious if you could touch you've already done a great job. I wonder if you could touch even a little deeper on what was like for you, both learning like very intellectual, academic, deep Bible stuff, but at the same time, you're serving at your church. This is something I can relate to as well. I was a pastor for 4 years before I started teaching at ORU. And I, in some ways I could have looked back at my story and thought, man, if only I knew that teaching was really, quote, the thing I was supposed to be doing. Right. But I am so glad I did that role for 4 years, because the things that I learned from being in practical ministry. Anyway, I just wonder if you can speak that to yourself more for people, because sometimes our Bible study, whether we're in academics or not, it can feel like it can almost become disconnected from real life in a bad way. So I wonder if you can just speak a little more to that.
Yeah, I think there's something about it. I think about one of my heroes is Dr. Martin Luther King. And many people, and even in our own community, many people like quote Dr. King, but never really like read him. You know what I mean? And know like, oh, the I Have a Dream speech. And it's like, man, this guy was brilliant. He had a PhD. Many people don't know, at the age of 26.
What?
So I'm 26 right now, and I'm about to start my PhD. Right? He finished at 26.
Jeez.
And he got it in systematic theology. People don't really, Anyway,
wow.
One of the things I appreciate about Dr. King was that he always was a pastor, even while he was doing his PhD, and even after. So he understood the plights of real people and their questions and their concerns. Now, if you listen to his sermon, it's like he's quoting Plato, Aristotle, and then he'll go to some pseudepigraphal literature, like and the Bible, parables, foreign policy, like he has range, but he knew how to take all of those raw ingredients, right, and make a smoothie, right, so that someone could drink and take the nutrients from it. And so I just think that, on a practical level, when you're dealing with real people, when you're ministering to real people, you even see things in the text that you wouldn't have saw if
Mm,
you just stayed in the library for 24 hours and
mm,
looked at commentaries or looked at monographs, right? Now, mind you, I'm for the deep technical work, right? But they
sure.
just have to be merged, and that's not
Yep.
everybody's job or bent or
Yeah.
gifting, right? But the scholars that I've like learned from and
Mm,
appreciated, even to this present day, are people who can kind of traverse
mm,
both sides, right? The
mm,
academy and the church, and
mm.
we need it, right? There's so
Yeah.
many insights. I think while I was in my master's program, where I was just like,
Mm,
man, if such and such could be sitting next to me and
mm,
hear how this text bears on their real life. And so we need, yeah, we don't just need, I always say, like, we don't just need interpreters, we also need translators, right?
mm.
We need people to translate the best of scholarship for a wider audience. And I'll tell, I was
Yeah.
actually having a conversation with a friend about this the other day. I'm so grateful for people like Bible Project, right?
Yes.
Like
Yeah.
people don't realize that Tim Mackey has a PhD in Hebrew Bible,
Yep.
but he's taking the things he's learned and the things he knows and putting it in a way where it's palatable for a wide audience. So I
Yeah.
think that is extremely important, and yeah, the Lord can really use it.
Yeah. Bible Project has been tremendous for me.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
yeah,
So let's go keep going this direction then. Like your podcast is an amazing example of you doing this for people.
yeah,
And like you said, you want to present things in a way where it's engaging and meaningful and transformative for people. So again, if you haven't listened to the podcast, you got to subscribe to his. Yours is, you have an interesting title for your podcast. That could be an interesting way for us to segue into this.
yeah.
Windows and mirrors,
Hmm.
right? Like, I'm expecting like some word Bible or church or something in there, right? You see windows and mirrors. Maybe why is this what your podcast is called, and what's kind of the framework through which you see
Yeah.
how you approach your podcast?
No, that's good. So backstory, right? It's the pandemic. It's 2020, and this is early pandemic, right? Where we don't know a lot, about what's going on. The vaccine hadn't been out, all this kind of stuff. And so our pastor John, who's also the co-host, said like, man, what if we started a Bible podcast? At this point, we're at home, so like all of our like services are completely online. You know what I mean?
Mm,
Like we
mm,
can't go into the building. And he was like, just like something maybe a few minutes a day where we walk through Scripture to encourage folks. And this was
mm,
just at our church, just at Cornerstone. Cornerstone
mm,
has 300 and some members, right? That mostly live in Atlanta or in this area, the West End of Atlanta. And yeah, so it was like, all right, if a few people listen, we'll be grateful, right? And so we started that, and then the idea behind the name Windows and Mirrors was the Bible is more like a window than it is a
mm,
mirror we come to see through and see God, not to it to primarily look at and see
mm,
ourselves. And so in other language, it's God's self revelation, right? It is His divine disclosure of who He is and what He's done in history
mm.
to redeem people for Himself. And so yeah, we just wanted to do that in a palatable way. I think that if I can be candid here,
Good.
there aren't many podcasts like that African Americans are doing, right? And so even when we speak, and Jonas has had to like stop the podcast at points because he's like, "Hey, bro, like this is not seminary. Like, remember who your audience is." You know what I mean? So
Mm,
we want to speak in very plain language. We
mm,
use a lot of slang,
mm.
nothing obviously derogatory, but just like, yo, like what's up, what's good, my G, like kind of how our people talk, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And in the overwhelming response of people, again, we started it just for our church. People around the world have tuned in and been blessed
Amazing.
and have read through. So we started in August of 2020, went
Yep.
all the way through the whole Bible, and we started back again top of 2022. And so, yeah, 10 minutes a day, 4 chapters a day, and you just be surprised, right? Like,
Yep.
what you can do in community. It's been said that if you want to go uh, fast, go alone. You want to go far, go together, right?
Mm,
So it's been amazing to see, numerous people saying I've read through the Bible all the way through for the first time,
yep.
or people saying I got through the Old Testament for the first time, or
Yep.
Leviticus was actually interesting,
Yes.
right? Like all of these things, like literally every other day, man, just warm our heart. And so
Yep.
that was the idea behind it. And yeah, like all the things that, John's pastored almost, 15, 16 years,
Mm,
actually sitting in his library right now. He's out of town. Um, so all the things he's learned, educated as well, and all the things I was learning in the moment,
mm,
like in my master's
yep.
program, I'm like, oh man, like okay, like and all the things I'm reading and
Yeah.
preparing for the PhD program, things I had to read, trying to take that, and it's a task, right? Take
Yeah.
those things and put it
Yep.
in this type of vehicle where people that look like me could take in, and so it's been an
Yeah.
overwhelming response. The Lord has really blessed it.
That's
Yeah.
awesome. Yeah, I love what you're doing. Obviously this is great for everyone.
Mhm.
But as a white person, I think it's just representation matters, and
Yep.
everybody should care about that. Right.
Yeah.
And so I'm glad that one, we just have good people doing great work,
Yep.
but also we need all types of good people doing
Mm,
great work.
mm,
And so
mm.
thank you for answering that call,
Thank you, man.
for both people like you in your community, but also for the world. I'm not surprised it's resonating with people
Mm,
all over the place.
mm.
Um, so yeah, that's a tough thing. You find a way to do a literally about 10 to 15 minute podcast,
Yeah.
and it's perfect for a commute.
Mhm.
And I was listening to an episode on my way to the office today, and it's a great way to. I'll tell you this. I think for some people, this idea of how do I read the Bible all the way through a year, the consistency I'd have to have, that's tough.
Yeah.
But you guys bring this to life, and the way that you do the approach, it's fun, it's
Mm,
engaging, it
mm.
feels transformative. We learn things,
Yeah.
and I think you somehow find the perfect balance of whatever 3 or 4 chapters you're covering.
Mm.
Like you give us the big picture, what's going on, but it doesn't become like a boring bullet point. All right, these 4 verses are about this. These 3 verses about this. Yeah, there's a place for that if you want to get into the weeds. But I think anyone, no matter what your background is, you're going to have fun and you're going to learn things.
Yeah. Yeah.
And you've been blowing my mind with some of the stuff you guys have been saying.
Yeah. Thank you, man. Thank you.
And you and John, by the way, a great team. And so I think that's great hearing both of you. Like when I first started my podcast, similar to you, I had the same idea of like similar idea, I should say, that we need
Mhm.
more people to be able to understand the Bible. I chose to focus on the Old Testament
Mhm.
for Christians as kind of like the niche.
Mhm.
Uh, for certain reasons, I also loved Hebrew a lot more than Greek. It's what I teach now.
Yeah.
And
Yeah. Yeah.
uh, but anyway, I love dialogue more than monologues. That's why I love bringing in guests, but also having a co-host. And Nathan's great. We have similarities. We're also different, and it's fun doing that. So I think it's cool too. To also have you and John together with that kind of stuff.
Yeah. Absolutely. Absolutely. Yeah.
One thing I want to touch on is again, you're taking a big step. You already alluded to this, which is huge. If some people aren't aware of the process it takes to go through even just a master's degree, I think we hear it thrown around, and so I think we're just culturally aware, like, oh, that's a really impressive thing. But
Yeah.
man, like, especially when you got real life and real jobs, like,
Yeah.
you're working and you do your master's degree, and now you're about to step up to a PhD, which is a
Mhm.
very intense. Nathan, my co-host, he has a PhD, so he's told me firsthand like what it's like.
Where did
So
you get
anyway,
it?
his PhD was at the University of Aberdeen, and his was in
Okay.
Hebrew Bible and ancient Near East. So his specialty is again Christian, but his focus is on the Hebrew Bible, specifically the understand the ancient Near East history and cultural component, which you bring up in your podcast sometimes too, to understand what's going on. And he wrote on the tree of the knowledge of good and evil,
Oh, no.
and trying to understand what this might look like with an ancient Near Eastern context and view, and
Yeah.
understanding
Mm.
the rest of the story.
Yeah.
He's great. He also did his master's degree at Hebrew University of Jerusalem,
Nice.
which was awesome. He's great. He's also just a good man and great family man, cares about people, great man of faith, but also just he's super wicked smart. I mean, my
Wow. Wow.
gosh,
Wow.
he knows his stuff.
Gotta
So
check out his
he's
work.
great.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Awesome. Yeah. So yeah.
So anyway, so you're doing your PhD. I wonder if you know, first, I would just be curious before we dive into what your PhD is about. Is you chose to embark on a journey very few people do.
Mhm.
Just before even diving what you're doing, what kind of led you to say, "I'm going to do this, and this is important. I'm gonna do something not many people do."
Yeah. So, man, when you look back, you realize like how many factors played into where you are now or where you're going. For me, it was I just felt yeah, I'm so Christian. Called to it.
It's fine.
I
It's
just got
great.
called to it. I just got
Yeah.
called to it, man. And it was like initially when I went into seminary, it was like, all right, I love the church. I love being with people, doing life with people on this journey
Mm,
with Jesus. And so I'm gonna just get this degree and be a pastor. That's it,
mm,
Lord. I'm
mm.
fine.
Yeah.
And about halfway through, I was like, I actually love this too, you know?
Mm,
Like I
mm.
was I was sad, like being honest, like when class was over sometime. I was, the guy who like tried to read every letter of every book that was assigned, you know what I'm saying? I remember leaving a class one time, and I always share this. I think I shared on a podcast recently. I was leaving a gospels class, one of my professors, and I remember leaving so enamored with the Lord
Mm,
that I got in the car and I had to turn on worship music.
mm,
I just had to worship. That was the only response that I had at that moment. And so I was like, man, like I would love to think about these things he's thinking about for a living. You know what I
mm.
mean? Like, and help people see them as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, the part of it was Professor Dr. Bruce Lowe, New Testament
Mm,
scholar, excellent
mm,
man as well. So yeah, so that was like okay, like I it was this burning
mm,
desire, and we talked about the need, so that was kind of part of it too, burning desire. And then I just found that, like you mentioned earlier, man, that there was this low amount of representation
mm,
in in terms of African Americans in Old Testament scholarship that were Christian as well. So just all of
mm.
those kind of like unique factors of who the
Yeah.
Lord has made me. It was like, hey, Matt, like my voice is needed as well. Our voices
Yeah.
are needed as well. And so all of those things were like, okay, I'm gonna do this. I was so green. I didn't know nothing. Like I had to ask my professor, like, where do I go? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I didn't know how to apply. So that was a whole process, learning how to
Mm,
apply, learning, who, like I had to, and we could talk about a little bit about this a little bit more later.
mm,
My methodology
mm,
had to intersect with my supervisor's methodology, right? And I couldn't
mm.
just go
Yeah.
to any guy, you know what I mean? Like because people have specific specialties, like you said, your co-host Ancient Near East is his specialty. So
Mm,
yeah, so that was that, and particularly, and if we can go here, we can pivot here.
yep.
Like my PhD will be in the methodology of interbiblical exegesis. And so it's basically how later texts use earlier texts in the Bible.
Mm.
And so it's that. And I would say, man, like there was this book I read in my master's that was like my gateway drug to being hooked on this stuff. And it was Richard Hayes. He's a
Mm,
New Testament scholar. Richard Hayes has this book. The first one I read was Reading Backwards, and it's like a
mm,
earlier version of a longer book that he expanded called Echoes of Scripture in the Gospels. And then another book I read by him was Echoes of Scripture in the Letters of Paul. And so
mm,
what he's looking at is how Paul is not like directly quoting the Old Testament, but alluding to it and echoing it, and how the Gospels do the same to highlight different features that they're trying to bring about. And so I was like, whoa, like I had this vague notion
mm,
before that the Bible was connected, and from our perspective, points to Jesus, all these
mm,
things, and that the New Testament quotes the Old Testament.
mm,
And I had this vague notion of that, and then I realized like it's actually more sophisticated than that. And so
mm,
I was just so hooked, man. And I went to Dr. Greg Beale, who has had a great influence on me. He's a New Testament scholar as well. He has him and Don Carson have this book, a commentary on the New Testament use of the Old. Got that. I bought it, bought it, and was reading through that and was like, this is crazy. And so New Testament scholars were my like gateway drug. N.T. Wright was another guy who was doing a lot of this work. And then I realized the Old Testament did it within the Old Testament.
mm.
so
Yeah.
later Old Testament authors use earlier Old Testament texts, and I'm like, oh, this is insane. And
Yeah.
so a lot of Christian scholars, but even some Jewish scholars as well, and some Israeli scholars, like you mentioned, Michael Fishbane, Benjamin Somer,
Mm,
Moshe Winfield, just so many, Yair Zakovich, so many different scholars that helped me there, and seeing this like inner
Mm.
continuity and dialogue, I like to say, between texts. And so that's actually what I'll be doing when I get to St. Andrews. My professor, my supervisor, Michael Lyons,
Mm.
that's his thing. So
So cool,
yeah,
man. You getting me
it's
excited. Can't wait
yeah,
to see what you write up. This can be good.
yeah, yeah. It's super cool, man. And it's funny because, and the Lord is so good, bro. I mean, I tell you, He really is. I have moments, man, where I'm almost brought to tears because it's just seeing His hand. You
Mm.
know, I'll have the opportunity when I go to St. Andrews to work on Deuteronomy 28
Mm.
and some intertextual or inner biblical allusions of Deuteronomy 28, particularly verses 64 to 68, and how they're alluded to in the prophets, Hosea and Jeremiah in particular. And I argue for a fulfillment of some of that stuff, and we can get into that too if you want. But,
Yeah.
um, Deuteronomy 28 is this passage that African Americans have used to create an entire worldview, right?
Mm.
So the Black Hebrew Israelites, right? It is this large group that is growing as we speak,
Mm.
and they believe that Deuteronomy 28 was fulfilled in the transatlantic slave trade, and that Black people are the original Jews. And so if you're listening to this and you've been in African American communities, you've probably seen them on YouTube that they're on the side of the road proselytizing that this is truth. And so it's like and imagine me. I'm in seminary. There's some other guys with me, and we're going out. We're sharing, the gospel and talking to people in our neighborhood and stuff. And we run into these guys. Like these are the kinds of
Mm.
things we're dealing with in our context. And for me to be able to work on that exact
Mm.
passage is like a real gift from the Lord, a phenomenal opportunity. And when I started reading in the literature, I realized that verse 68 in particular, where I can read it really quick.
Yeah, go ahead.
Where it talks about this is Moses speaking. He says, "The Lord will take you back in ships." That in ships right there, it's actually disputed in the literature. So in the argument in the African American
Mm.
community with the Black Hebrew Israelites, they argue that, see, we came in ships, and it's like when you read the actual scholarly literature on it, that is actually disputed whether it should even be translated as in ships.
Mm.
And so, and it's to be slightly technical,
Go
it's
ahead.
the phrase is what many people have read it as is ba onioth, which is in ships. But I'm arguing, and there's been other German scholars and Jewish scholars who've argued this as well, is that it's ba onioth. So it's, instead of in ships, it's in mourning. And so there's a dispute in the literature, and even Von Rad in the 20th century, it's such a dispute that he was like, we don't really even know, like we don't know, whether this presents a contemporary possibility at this time
Mm.
or was in fact realized. He literally says, that's a quote.
Mm.
And so yeah, and I found, as I've read actually a lot of Jewish scholars who argue for the in mourning reading. And so what I'm doing is
Mm.
taking some of those insights,
Mm.
and yeah, we can even talk about the context of how it makes more sense in the context,
Yeah.
and how you see the fulfillment in Jeremiah 42 to 44 as well. So yeah, this stuff is like it's deeper than
Yep.
ripe, as we say sometimes. It's it's this missional heart behind it. You know what I mean?
Yep.
And
Yep.
love for just reading and learning as well,
Yep.
but love for Jesus as well. So it's just all of these things
Yep.
kind of coming together with this work have a
Yeah.
privilege of doing. Yeah.
Yeah. About to say that this really brings in all the characteristics about
Yeah.
where you have both, again, the deep desire for learning, but also motivated by your personal community experience and
Absolutely.
real people.
Absolutely.
And then I've found with anyone who does PhD dissertation stuff, like by nature, you have to really focus in on a small portion because you're going so deep.
Mm.
But that deep work has implications beyond what people might even imagine because of, like you said, even with the intertextual exegesis stuff, like,
Mm.
you're applying it to maybe a few verses, but again, like what you do through that will then impact the way that you help others to do other types of interbiblical interpretation, exegesis stuff. So
Yeah.
very exciting. Good.
Yeah. And the thing is, even with this project, because when I pitched the proposal to Dr. Lyons, he was like you can't get a distance like 300 pages on this particular few verses would be tough. And so we talked, and he's like, hey, the first chapter will be the inner biblical stuff. That's like, where your bread and butter is, the meat, that's his specialty. But then we brought in a second supervisor, Dr. Madavi Nevada, who is also at St. Andrews, who specializes in more ancient Near East stuff. And so what I'll do in another chapter is look at ancient Near Eastern parallels, looking at Assyrian annals and king lists, inscriptions, some Phoenician texts, and we don't have texts in Phoenicia, but we have Greek translations that are considered reliable. We have that, but then also a history of interpretation chapter as well. So where I'm not just looking at the Hebrew text, I'm looking at the manuscript tradition. I'm looking at how it's been interpreted in ancient Israel, and then as it comes to Judaism and in even Christianity. And so I'm kind of tracing that, and then it's a lot, man. And I know I'm in it. I was thinking about it this morning.
Hey, that's good.
Yeah, and then there's an Israeli scholar, Yair Zakovich. He used to be at Hebrew University. Do you know that name?
Actually, I think that Nathan studied with him because he's talked about him. Yeah.
Wow. Yes. So
I'll bring it up to Nathan. I'm pretty sure he studied with him. Go ahead.
Yeah. So he's brilliant. So he has this kind of methodology, like as a subcategory in the interbiblical, intertextual stuff. He talks about analogy and inversion, right? And so basically, earlier texts may have a narrative, and then a later text will invert that narrative, right? And so what I'll kind of build off of his work is say, hey, the Exodus was the paradigm event in Israel's history, but it's inverted here in this Deuteronomy text, where Moses says you'll go back to Egypt. But this motif, I argue, is present throughout the Pentateuch. Assuming the Pentateuch is this cohesive document, you have the Israelites wanting to go back to Egypt. So you have this escalation where Moses says at the end of 28, you'll go back in mourning, I argue, into Egypt. But then he says this, he says, you'll sell yourselves, and he uses that Lamic preposition of specification, like you'll sell yourselves as female and male slaves, but there will be no buyer. So in other words, he's saying it'll be a reversal of God's promise. God promised to bring you out of Egypt, and he brought you out, but it'll be a reversal, but it'll be an escalation. So you were slaves before, but you won't even be slaves. Like that's how bad it will be if you will, disobey. And so you see that there, and this is like, I still have a ton of research to do. So I may come back and be like, oh, I was wrong, but this is where I am now. You know what I mean? Yep. And this was enough for him to say, okay, let's do this, Dr. Lyons. But so you have that, and then what else? Even in the New Testament, that's what I was going to say. Stephen in Acts, he says that Israel turned back to Egypt in their hearts, right? And so even there you have authors pulling on that. But then even Matthew 2, right? And I was thinking about this, like, man, even in Matthew 2, and you have all the imagery of the Exodus and Moses and Matthew, but he goes back into Egypt. And so if Jesus is, according to New Testament authors, the fulfillment of this Israelite story, if he's rehearsing the story of Israel in his person, you even see him going back to Egypt as well to escape the persecution from Herod. So there's a lot of stuff going on there. I didn't even get time to talk about the Hosea and the Jeremiah and how that'll tie in. But man, it's a lot of, like you said, man, it is a small question I'm trying to answer, but you have to do and read a lot to answer that small question. You know what I'm saying? So I'm doing a little ancient Near East, a little history interpretation, and the inner biblical stuff that I really love. So,
man, this is epic. I don't want to stop you. I mean, anything you want to talk about this, you go with it. I mean, I know we could talk forever just about your dissertation alone.
Yeah,
but it's awesome.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's so much. Yeah, but that's the gist of what I'm thinking through, and
that's so cool. And it sounds like you're with some advisors who you vibe with, like the fact you're with someone who does the intertextual stuff already. So that synthesis, I think, is going to be really good.
Yeah, it should be fun, man.
One question I want to ask you, like, let's say there's somebody who's on the earlier end of getting into Bible stuff, and they hear you talk, like, man, I feel his passion, and he's even talking about he's studying, and like the studying is leading him to want to worship God, and it's just like, wow, like, I want that, but I just when I'm approaching the Bible, I'm just trying to make my way through.
Hmm.
I want to be a good Christian. My pastor's talking about reading the Bible more, but
Mhm.
I just don't know. Like, do you have any thoughts that you would tell like that kind of person?
Yeah. Yeah. So part of it, there's a lot of ways to go with this. I mean, my personality bent is passion. Like that's partly me. So
Hmm.
in other words, I think sometimes that people can measure their faithfulness by how loud or how passionate they
Hmm.
are.
Hmm.
And everybody's temperament isn't that way. Like for example, my wife, Jasmine Pinckney, who my best friend,
Yeah.
she she's not that way. She's not this, extroverted, loud, deeply passionate person, but her zeal when she's flourishing spiritually, when she's, going hard for the Lord, looks different. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? And so I
Good.
would encourage a person with that first, like,
That's
man,
good.
I'm not the standard, right? Um, Jesus is, you know what I mean? So
That's
I'm
good.
not the standard. There's that. Two, I would say, if you're struggling to get into the word, there's a variety of reasons why we could be struggling, right? Some people,
Yeah.
and I've been more attuned to this lately. Like some people have been hurt by the word. Some people
Yeah.
have been have experienced trauma and church abuse and church hurt and reading the word. I've heard someone say, "Man, when I read the word, I hear the person that abused me, the pastor that abused me, or the leader that abused me." It's like, oh, that's tough, you know.
Hmm.
And so, what the best thing I would say, man, is to be in a community. I think that's just the basic bottom line thing, man. Like in community, the Lord does for us things that we could never do for ourselves. You know what I
Hmm.
mean? Like
Yeah.
being around a group of people who love Jesus, who
Hmm.
love you, who know you, who care for you, who can pray for you, who can, if you're not able to read the word in this moment, who can speak the word to you in conversation without, uh, without it being just like sit down Bible study, who can pray the word
Hmm.
over you, who can encourage you with the word and all
Hmm.
those sorts of things. But also too, I mean, that's if someone's hurt. But if you're just struggling, I think that there's so many ways now, man. Like,
Hmm.
there was a time where you just had to open your Bible in solitude and read. Now there's audio Bibles, there's apps,
Yeah.
there's so many different
Yeah.
creative ways to get the life-giving word that
Hmm.
shapes us and transforms us into us. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And if you think about like medicine, right? Like I like to think of it like there's so many ways to get medicine into a person, right? You can
Hmm.
chew it, you can swallow it, you can get it inject. Like it's so
Hmm.
many different ways to get it in. I think we need to just continue to be creative. One of the things I found is that with the podcast is that people who were struggling, like there was a moment where me I was talking to John. I was struggling to get into the word before the podcast, in the pandemic, isolated,
Yep.
decentralized. And that podcast alone helped me for sure, but it helped other people as well
Yep.
who are not just people who sit down and read for an hour. Like that's just
Yep.
not how they're made. So
Yep.
like, oh, I can hear them in
Yep.
language that I can understand, and then I can go back to the text as well. So like that, those
Yep.
just creative ways
Yep.
to get in. I would encourage people to be creative, and we're far more creative than we give ourselves credit for too. Like if we really
Mm.
want to do something, we'll figure we'll figure out how to do it, man. And so I would just encourage them community and creativity. Those are the two C's.
That's really good. Yeah.
Yeah.
I totally relate on the whole difference in spouse personality thing,
Yeah.
like, and that's been good for me too. Just realizing, you can be very healthy spiritually in your walk with God, but it doesn't look the same as somebody else. My wife's very introverted. I'm very extroverted.
Mm-hmm.
And just the ways that, we walk out our faith, there's a little bit of a difference in that. And so you're right. That is important to look
Yeah.
at those.
Yeah. Yeah.
Um, in the whole community aspect, I was thinking about, being on a sport. I was your D1 athlete. I
Mm-hmm.
mean, how many of those workouts would, if you had to do it all by yourself all the time, like how hard would you push you as compared to the times when you're with the team doing the sprint drills or doing the shooting drills?
Bro.
And, I
Bro.
mean, so good.
No, like literally, I remember, like there's something weird about it, man. Like, when we would have to run in practice, it was something about everybody running together that
Yeah.
made the load just not seem as bad. I still hate sprinting today, but you know what I'm saying?
Sure.
Like there was something about doing it with people that made it a better experience. You know what I
Yeah.
mean? So how much more, right? Like walking with the Lord, how much
Yeah.
more taking in the life-giving word, how much
Yeah.
more worship, you know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So yeah, absolutely. I think that sports has it's just so funny, like we said, like the Lord
Mm.
has uses what happens and goes on in our life to like shape us.
Yeah.
And so in many ways, like I'm very and this is not to be self-aggrandizing in any way, but just like kind of disciplined, you know what I mean? Like
Mm.
I had to get up and work out at 5 a.m., for like 20 years. So it's like,
Props
hey,
to you, man.
you think I'm
Yeah.
a, you know what I mean? Like you think
Yeah.
that won't shape you in some kind of way, So
Yeah.
um gratefully, like sports has taught me a lot about my spiritual life and my walk with
Sure.
God and life in general. And so yeah, I think that there's a lot to learn there. And what's been great, and I've really thank God for, is the um, intensity, I think is the word, that I used to approach training and
Mm-hmm.
shooting and all that kind of stuff I had to
Mm.
do. I'm now kind of transferring that,
Mm.
what I do now. You know what I
That's
mean?
cool.
Yeah. And so, yeah, so sports has definitely been a.
Yeah. That's a lot of good wisdom there. The creativity point's also good. Like realizing, hey, how are you wired? What are your,
Mm,
what are your strengths and weaknesses? What type of methods are good for you? And
mm.
even about the audio Bible you talk about. We think about for most of history, most Christians or
Oh, man.
Jews have listened to the Bible, not just for technology reasons, right? So again, nothing. I'm glad we have,
Mm,
I'm glad physical books are cheaper and more readily available. I'm glad we have apps. Nothing wrong against reading physically, but for me, I actually, whenever I'm trying to just probably my best way to engage with the Bible, if I'm trying to read, is actually listening. I just, for how I'm wired, it's why
mm,
I started a podcast on a blog. I prefer
mm.
speaking and listening.
Yeah.
And obviously, when I'm doing deep research, I need to read physically, and there are times I enjoy that for certain reasons. But I think for everybody out there, there are ways for them to engage, and they might be trying. I'll give one small personal example. I remember when I was learning modern Hebrew at the beginning. Well, not beginning, probably I was, right at that cusp of fluency with modern
Mm.
Hebrew. And I remember I was meeting with a mentor of mine who he was in the military, still is actually, and intelligence specialist, does language stuff too,
Wow.
with special units. Anyway, we were meeting up. We'd meet up and just talk in modern Hebrew. It was really helpful for me.
Wow.
One of the things he told me at one point, though, was that if you really want to get good at modern Hebrew, you got to
Mm.
read news. And
Mm.
so, of course, I'm like, man, this guy, he's the guy. He has the highest language score they've ever received in the military for Hebrew. I'm going to listen to the guy and do it. But then I realized over time, like, man, why do I hate this? Why is this just, ugh? I realized I don't read the news in English because I don't like reading the news in English. So why would I like
Mm.
reading the news in Hebrew? And
Mm.
so, what I tell my students is like, hey, whatever you enjoy doing in English, you'll probably enjoy doing in Hebrew. If you
Wow.
don't enjoy doing it in English, you won't enjoy in Hebrew. So if you like TV shows, find Israeli TV shows.
Mm.
Um, anyway, this is about you. I don't want to talk more about me, but it's just, I think just to echo your point, like finding out again
Yeah.
how you're wired. So again, if you're that disciplined person, wake up at 5 a.m, just like redirect that energy to
Mhm.
this. If you're more of a
Mm.
night owl, maybe that's a better time. Or,
Mm.
if you're anyway, let's get back to you though. This is all super helpful stuff.
Yeah.
One thing I wanted to ask about, you kind of touched on your methodology for your dissertation. I
Mhm.
wonder if you could talk a little bit about, you're creating a lot of content. You're posting a lot of videos on Instagram, you're doing YouTube, or you're doing your podcast. Is there anything I'm missing, by the way? Anything else that you're doing?
Patreon. So
Yeah.
shout out to our Patreon supporters if you're listening to
Yeah.
this. Yeah, so we try to record extra podcasts
Okay.
for them as much as possible on the Patreon, me and John, or sometimes just me. And so yeah, so all those three are kind of my yeah.
Okay.
I do with the
So one thing I'm curious about is like, what's your process? And this question might be technically a little more relevant for people who are doing this in a slightly professional sense, because obviously there's a difference between if you got your 9 to 5
Mhm.
and you're doing your work and you're gonna get your Bible devotional time, listen to the Windows and Mirrors podcast, whatever. But like this question, maybe asking a little more specifically for people out there who maybe they're pastors, they're writers, they're podcasters, they're people who they're kind of driven like you, where they don't just want to have this, they do Bible stuff for themselves and their family, right? But they want to lead a small group. They want to,
Mm.
you know, and there's a content creation process that goes with that. Is there anything you found helpful when it comes to the time you spend doing the learning and the content preparation, the delivery that you found helpful?
Yeah. So, if I can be honest, I mean, this is an area that I think I'm still like I'm still growing in. So to your point, I actually had a 9 to 5 until like March of this year. So
Okay.
I was in seminary, I was newly married. Get my order right.
Yeah,
Seminary, podcast, and work as well.
man.
So it was a beast. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Like weekends was when we
you're
were.
hustling.
Yeah, it was weekends we would record, and then early in the morning before work.
Mm,
And so it looked different then, but now that I don't have that occupation anymore, I
mm,
think for me I'm a morning person. I think it comes back to knowing how you are, how you wire.
yeah.
For me, this is just as my process. I don't share this with everybody, but man, you talking. Um,
Hmm.
when I get up in the morning, the first thing I do is grab my Bible. Right now, I've had to work really hard because my wife can tell you I can just scroll on Instagram and social media
We
for
all can.
hours, right? And be in group messages, laughing and playing with people, all kind of stuff. So the first thing I do, and it's just been helpful for me to pass like maybe 3 months I've been doing this. Grab my Bible and open it and read it for my own soul, not for the podcast, not for anything, just for my own
Mm,
heart, my own soul, my own mind. And I try to go outside too, because I just feel like, and
mm,
I'm big on this. Like just technology and social media
mm,
is really shaping us.
mm,
I feel like, and I just want to have a practical act of defiance is what I call it.
mm,
Of saying like, man, I serve a king in a kingdom that is not of this world, right? And so like I'm not going to just do everything everybody else does, right? So
mm,
for me, I get up, I read, and that's my routine. Like I get a cup of
mm.
coffee. John has got me into coffee. He has his own coffee business. Anyway,
Mm.
I get up, I read, I drink coffee, and pray. And then after that, so mornings are best my most alert hours. After that, that's when I transition to podcast stuff. And so from there, it's all right. If we're in Second Chronicles, I'm reading a chapter of Second Chronicles, and from there, I'm typing out my notes. I'm using as far as resources. This may be helpful for some.
Mm,
If I'm not clear on something, just a simple commentary, right? I'm not trying to do an academic study. Commentary. I have this cultural backgrounds. It's actually right here. Study Bible, John Walton and Craig Keener
nice.
co-authored this. This is really good. The notes are really helpful. Two specialists in the ancient world. So that, and then yeah, I have a OneNote. This app is called OneNote, where it just houses all of my like notes and stuff. And so I do that, and then sometimes we record in the morning. So right before, kind of like 7, 8 is when John's daughter has to go to school and stuff. And we record in the morning. If we're ahead of the game, we'll batch record.
Mm,
But that's kind of the daily like rhythm, right? And then from there, it's okay, we've done it. We've went through it before, so I have
yeah.
prior notes to look at, so that helps
No,
as
yeah.
well.
That's great.
Yeah, but as far as that, and then it's like I still struggle sometimes with like reels. So like free game for anybody listening. Instagram is trying to compete with TikTok. So reels are the way to go. Like that, like those. If you're into content creation or influence
Yeah.
or whatever, praise God for you. We hope you're putting out good stuff in the world, right? But you know, the reels are the route to go. And as far as content from there, it's usually something I've said in a podcast or something I've
Mm,
written before, and I just try to recycle that. You know what I mean? Like put it on there.
mm,
And the goal was to get um, 3 to 5, or three reels per week. I actually been slacking this
mm.
week, but it just comes
I feel you. I
from
get it.
yeah. It just comes from something I've already talked about.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it's been helpful. Reels too. It gets your like content in front of people who don't follow you. So that's the
Yeah.
point of doing it. Your story, people just see the story that follow you. And so what I'm doing is like, okay, I'm talking about God. Like I want people. I'm like at the end of the day, I don't
Mm,
care about people following me. I care about people following Jesus,
yeah.
right? So I want to get this
Yeah.
in as many people as possible. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so with that, like hashtags is another thing too. Like hashtags get your content in front of people. So like finding the right hashtag, seeing what's trending. Like, okay, love is trending. It's always trending, right? I'm going to put love in almost every, even if it's
Mm,
usually about love or whatever, or wisdom or truth. Those
mm,
are common ones. Christ is, one that's always trending. So, um, yeah, that's kind of my process with that, man. We don't reinvent the wheel. If it's something like Patreon, so they get extra content, they get longer podcasts,
mm,
extra stuff we've studied or thought about. So, for example, I talked about how I love Old Testament, but I love like New Testament. I love
mm,
theology.
mm,
So we talked about on one podcast the beatific vision, which is this
mm,
doctrine that the Christian church has said that from the scriptures that one day that we will see God, we will actually see Him, and what that means, and took them to a few texts, 1 John 3, Revelation 20:22, I think, different texts to talk about that a little bit. But yeah, it wasn't going through 4 chapters, but it was something extra we gave them. And so yeah, I think for us it's things that have sparked and inflamed our own hearts, right?
mm.
Because those things are the things that you'll communicate with a type of passion and fervor. And um yeah, so
Yeah, that's great. I appreciate you sharing the behind the scenes of this all. I think
yeah,
it's really helpful, because people
yeah,
can see obviously what's presented, but what goes into creating, whether it's tactics
yeah,
or just the some of the real stuff of like, all right, we record before John takes his kids to school. You know what I mean? Like it's
yeah,
just real life. You got your 9 to 5,
yeah,
and I think that's just very relatable for people, and realizing like, yeah, we got real life, and here's how we try to make it work with what we're passionate about. We pursue it,
hmm,
and we work on real life too.
absolutely, man.
So as we kind of reach the end of our time together, I'll ask you one last question. Just, is there anything that's on your heart that you just want to share with people,
Mm.
or maybe there's just something that you've been chewing on recently that's just kind of fresh that you want to share? Again, I didn't prep this question for you, but no pressure if this is too big, but just, is there anything that, just last words, you'd like to be able to share with people?
Man, that's a great question, Matt. Man, there's always stuff that's my wife gets most of it because she's around me the most. Hey, because this and this. Um, man, I think two things. One is we live, and maybe it's just some of the streams of people I'm around, Christian, non-Christian, African American. I think that in this, we, and I'm not even this kind of guy theologically, but like we need a revival. And this is just me, right?
Mm,
I think that there has been a lot, man. I think just from the political tensions in our society, the racial tensions in our society, and I think that we're in the prime season to see the Lord do something miraculous. So if you're listening to this, man, I just would encourage you to be tied to the scriptures, right? Like
mm,
stand on the scriptures, even if people don't like it, even if you face um, some flack for it, like the Lord will honor it. You know what I mean? And I just think about every revival we've seen in history. It in some way they went back to the Bible. They went back to what the scriptures said. And so I would just say, man, like in a time now when every side seems to be coming at the scriptures in that way, in their own way, stay tied to the scriptures and proclaim what's there. So there's that. Yeah, and then two, I think the idea of seeking God, right? So I said this on a reel, but it's really been pricking my heart, like seeking God. The Bible just talks over and over about those who seek Him will find Him, right?
mm,
There's this aspect of at the end of the day, you can seek so many things. You can seek fame, you can seek wealth, you can seek a specific career, you can seek a specific spouse, and you may or may not get those things.
mm,
But the beautiful promise of Scripture is that anyone who seeks the true God will
mm,
find Him.
mm,
Right? That's incredible to me. That's just like really. And the beautiful thing is like he's better than the wealth. He's better than the career. He's more impressive, glorious, awesome,
mm,
and beautiful than all of those things. And you're seeking those things that you may or
mm,
may not get. No, no, no. you can seek him and get him. And so the only prerequisite is wanting him, and you can have him, right? And so
Wow.
that that truth has just been rocking me, man. And even
Mm,
and this is for the regardless of where you come from, like in our own walk, right? As a Christian,
mm,
like there are moments when you're not seeking God.
mm,
And he gives the truth, like, no, if you seek me, you'll find me.
mm.
And it's just all throughout scripture, man. Old and New Testament, man. Like
Yeah.
seekers find, man. So I just want to encourage somebody with that. Yes, stick to the Bible, and it's stood the test of time. That, and then just seeking and finding God. He is willing to be found for those that seek. So
That is powerful. That's a perfect note for us to end this conversation with. One more time, if people want to connect more with you and your content, where do we find you?
yeah, hope you don't misspell my last name. Not you, the people who are trying to
I'll,
find
I'll put it
me.
in the show notes and
Okay.
description below too. So
Okay, so it's at Keith Pinckney 1 on Instagram. So that's my handle on Instagram, and then it's at Keith Pinckney 5. So that's Twitter. And then so it's just my name on both, and then Windows and Mirrors. So you can just type in Windows and Mirrors Bible podcast on like wherever you get your podcasts, and we should come up there. And then Window Mirror Pod on Twitter and Instagram as well, if you want to check out what we're doing with the Bible. This is something too, I just want to say, as me and my wife plan to move, this is something I plan to continue to do. So just for people who want to learn about the scriptures, and I'll say this too, it's helped me. Like I've
yeah,
learned a ton
yep,
just teaching the scriptures. They say once taught, twice learned. You know what I mean? And
yeah.
there's a different way you learn things when you have to teach them to people. So yeah.
And then also he mentioned his Patreon, and I'll just say for him. I mean, look, he's doing great work for the church, and uh, but he's got a real life, and everything that you guys can support helps him in the mission that he's doing.
Thank
So
you.
I also recommend find that Patreon page. Anyone who finds value in this and what he's doing, and help support him. So thank you so much, Keith, for joining. This was a wonderful conversation. Great having you on.
All right. Thank you, Matthew. Have a good one.